I think the other thing that we didn't even touch on is, gas prices. So, it started with COVID, then it went into tariffs, and now we're dealing with gas prices. So I personally don't see kind of long-term stability coming back to the supply chain anytime soon. So my call to action for anyone listening is, if there are opportunities, and again, maybe it's only 3 or 5% of your revenue, give it a shot.
Welcome to Agile Talks. I am Ryan. That is Mark. And today we are going to be talking about the geography of downtime. So, a little bit of background. Actually, you know what? I'm just rushing into things. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Ryan.
Oh, that was super personal. Thank you. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the geography of downtime. So during COVID, right, supply chain got really tight. It was very difficult to get products to the end user. It was also hard for manufacturers to get subcomponents to their actual manufacturing facilities. And this is something that forced a lot of smart companies to start looking at the actual geography of where their parts and products are being produced, which is something we're going to talk about today. So when you're getting stuff from a global supply chain, distance becomes a fact, and that becomes even more of an issue in today's world where there are fluctuating transportation costs. So Mark, can you give us a little bit of a background of what this looked like pre-COVID and post-COVID, and how smart companies have just been looking at it a little bit different?
Absolutely. I think let's even take a step back from COVID to really understand how some of these supply chains got so fragmented. Being a kid of the 80s, there was still a lot of manufacturing here in the United States, but you initially saw a shift into Japan and then from Japan to China. And I tell my kids often when we're watching Christmas Vacation over the holidays, if you watch Cousin Eddie walk down that aisle at Walmart and take notice at some of the prices that are listed in those aisles, it's surprising, right? The one that stands out are Cabbage Patch dolls. I think that the price is around $30, and that's 1989. Fast forward till 2026, the price of a Cabbage Patch doll is around the same price. So how is that possible? A lot of companies starting in the 80s and early 90s decided to offshore, and a lot of that was it started during the Clinton administration, but then went into the Obama administration purely for cheaper labor, right? They weren't chasing technology. They weren't chasing kind of better quality in some instances. They were simply chasing labor. So the United States had kind of 20 years of that ripple effect, a lot of productivity, better margins at a way cheaper cost. You fast forward and you start to realize, Shanghai specifically, if you looked from the 80s until now, you're kind of 500+% more expensive than you were when you originally shifted that production. So that's number one. You're no longer kind of apples to apples on labor cost. The second piece of that, and I think that was kind of in everyone's face, was COVID. Because these supply chains became so fragmented, COVID really shined a light on all the inconsistencies and honestly the vulnerability that a lot of these companies had never considered before, because so many of those decisions were really driven by price and margin. You didn't really consider risk, right? You didn't really consider, what if ports shut down and I can't get product into the United States? So it was just a whole nother chapter that companies really had to start considering.
Okay. And when they started considering it, what were they looking at first, right? Obviously, I think the easy thing is let's look at our supplier list. Let's look at where we get stuff from. I mean, I know in past jobs, I've been in meetings where we've talked about, secondary suppliers, tertiary suppliers? Can we get suppliers closer to us? Can we shorten the supply chain? Can we, even prior to tariffs, can we get stuff inside of the U.S. because it removes risk or de-escalates the chance that, something's going to go wrong? So, are there a couple things that you have seen groups do over the past couple years to at least analyze where their vulnerabilities are with getting, products from suppliers?
The short answer is yes to all of those things. I think it really depends on the industry, the type of regulations and the type of standards that your customers require. I think it is a hard look at suppliers in some of those instances. Looking back 20 or 30 years, we removed some of those options in the United States to even find localized suppliers that do certain technologies because we offshored it all. So in those instances, you either have to build a new supply chain or entice suppliers to kind of lean into that antiquated technology, or you have to look at solutions in a whole new way. So those pricing decisions and those margin amplifiers is, how do you get stuff back in the United States? Well, you're probably not going to have a line of 200 laborers kind of hand assembling stuff. You need to look at automation. And that discussion around, IoT, the Industrial Revolution, and the IoT push for robotics and kind of smart manufacturing has happened over the last kind of 10 or 15 years. And you see companies making those investments to really automate their line as kind of the first step to reshoring. I think the second piece is, once you kind of have an apples to apples, or you're at least in the arena from a productivity cost, is then you start looking at components of, how do I source stuff more local? How do I create flexibility for problem parts or problems that are parts that create a challenge? And instead of just in time, how do I position my supply chain with kind of risk mitigation or what if situations where I'm not just tied to one solution? I can kind of place bets on certain suppliers, turn them on, turn them off very quickly to create that agility in the supply chain.
Okay, so now let's cover, or let's discuss something that I know that is near and dear to your heart, other than all the charities you contribute to, because you're a great human being. So let's talk about the fact that companies now who maybe are struggling to get products or replacement parts for existing machinery. They don't want to carry massive stock. It used to be two to 3 weeks to get something from their supplier. It's now looking at 20 weeks, 50 weeks. I've heard you tell me timelines that were a year plus, because they have to basically start from scratch with a mold, and everything's become way harder. So can you tell me a little bit about how companies are using additive manufacturing to solve, maybe replacement part solutions, or, stocking the, the low volume, high mix, right? Mm-hmm. Those types of items, and then putting in the geography benefits that come with additive manufacturing, because it gives you a little bit more flexibility.
So again, there's a lot of ways to kind of unpack that question. I think the first part is, you're spot on around inventory. I think inventory was a play that a lot of companies had in place to offset those uncertainties and those unknowns. And in some instances, even kind of the inability to forecast with great accuracy. So you had these kind of additional players inside the supply chain simply just holding stock, right? Placing bets, holding inventory, and hoping that they got the right part numbers right. Where additive can really unlock additional value is, say it's even a very small set inside your inventory position or inside your product catalog. Additive can unlock that additional 5 to 7%. I would ask companies, what parts of your business are you simply walking away from, right? So maybe you do have solutions in place for high mix, low volume. Maybe you do have partners in place that can handle the flux in inventory and kind of place those strategic bets when it comes to the mix of your portfolio. But I guarantee every single company, if they're honest with themselves, they are no quoting business. They are walking away from business. They are obsoleting business. And I think it's an amazing opportunity to give kind of second life to some of these parts that essentially everyone would just kind of, put to grave. And what we've found with additive is it gives you the flexibility to at least be curious, right? It may not be the ultimate solution, but if you see product lines that need another year or two of support, additive can be that really good bridge to at least give customers the option. I'm not even saying inventory. I'm saying keep the part active, see what the market wants, see what your customers relate to, and give them the choice. That's ultimately how we're positioning the solutions that we make, is giving your customer the choice to say yes or no versus you making it for them.
Yeah, and I think when you think about that, that's because you're not carrying any inventory, and additive can be printed on demand, right? It makes it a lot easier to go to a customer and go, here's what it's going to be. If we're looking at like heavy machinery, right? And it's like, hey, you got a 20-year-old machine. Everything else is still working. You got one part that's down. Do you really want to invest in a brand new dump truck? Do you want to wait the 25 weeks to get a traditionally manufactured part and it's going to cost X amount of money? Or, hey, do you want to pay a little bit more? With additive, we can have it here in 2.5 weeks, and now you're back up and running, and that machine is functioning just as it was before, this part broke down, right? Obviously, that gives companies a lot more flexibility and the option to make their own decision on something that, previously, if you were a supplier, you would have just had to say to somebody like, hey, can't get it to you anymore. Gotta go sell that thing for scraps. And then one final thing, just to tie it back.
Yeah, sure.
Go to the junkyard.
Go to the junkyard.
Yeah, go to the junkyard, see if you can find something, or scrap it off one of your other pieces that's maybe a little bit older that looks like it. And then, the other flexibility I think that additive provides is the fact that you can print these things way more local than you could with other traditional manufacturing technologies, because you don't need a form. It doesn't need to be done in a special factory. There's way more additive flexibility to maybe print something within a couple miles or within 100 miles of where your location is versus, hey, we got to order this from China or Taiwan or Canada or Mexico or Brazil or somewhere globally where it becomes way more complicated. So any advice to companies out there that are looking to kind of move into this? Any practical tips of what their next steps would be?
I would say the biggest piece of advice that I would have is that even if you as an organization have tried additive before, if you've had special projects, or in some cases even if you've tried to bring this technology in-house, find other partners to pressure check your assumptions. I think that's the biggest opportunity that we've had with a lot of our clients is, the conversation typically starts as, well, we've tried that before, or, we've gone down that path. And this world is changing so fast, whether it's new materials, new printers, and now even with AI being integrated into some of the printers, it's changing. So unless you have a team that is 100% dedicated to it, it's hard to keep up. So, where we often start the conversation is give us those problem children, right? Or those parts that are creating the unknowns, and give it a shot, right? See if it does shrink your lead time. See if it does relieve some of the supply chain inconsistencies or vulnerabilities. I think the other thing that we didn't even touch on is, gas prices. So, it started with COVID, then it went into tariffs, and now we're dealing with gas prices. So I personally don't see kind of long-term stability coming back to the supply chain anytime soon. So my call to action for anyone listening is, if there are opportunities, and again, maybe it's only 3 or 5% of your revenue, give it a shot, right? Reach out and ask the right questions, and let us give you an honest opinion. Not every part fits. Not every situation is perfect for additive, and we're happy to give that direction as well. But it's something that's very interesting. We've had a lot of success with getting people over that bridge to really start considering this solution set as viable.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark. It has been a pleasure, honestly, an honor for me to guest host today. So until next time, thank you, everyone. Bye.